Hi, Paris Norris, and welcome to the Be That Life experience.
This is long awaited.
It has
Thank
been
you so
long
much.
awaited. What I love and the most that's going to happen at this podcast is the fact that you're not just such an inspirational human being to me, but you're also a really dear friend.
Yes.
And that's the reason why I think this podcast is going to be extra special because I know you more than a lot of people who get
Yeah.
you on their podcast seat know you.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. We've been
And
good friends for a long time, and yeah, we've done a lot of favors for each other over the years. So yeah, and we know each other's non-showbiz side.
And I think that's what makes a podcast like this so special is because
Mm,
I know the human behind everything else that we see online, right? Because
yeah.
online is just that highlight reel and it's
Mm.
not really, everything that we are authentically outside of that. Because how much can we truly show about ourselves online that we don't want to show, you know?
Yeah, and look, I think we all want to show the person that we want to be,
Yeah.
like our dream of who we wanted to become. That's what we put out there, and I do it, you do it. But it's not to say that that isn't us. It is, but it's maybe not everything. There's a wake up in the morning grumpy side, right? Which I think I've seen your other side. You've seen my other side. So yeah,
But it makes us human, and that's the beautiful side of it, right? It's
yeah.
just that we're just human like everyone else.
Mm.
And no matter how many followers or whatever accomplishments we've done online, at the end of the day, we're just human and we have the same struggles, challenges, and let's say fears that a lot of people have too. But talking on the topic of fear, because you're someone that I look up to as somebody that has accomplished so much, so fearless, so incredibly brave that for example, myself have done so many things. But it is only because I'm blessed with friendships like yours that makes me want to always push the envelope to the next level,
Hmm.
right? Like you've shown me a side about myself that like nothing is impossible because you've achieved a lot of what people think would be the impossible. And when I met you, I really feel like we're cut from the same cloth because we really love adventure.
Mm.
And like we really kind of, became people who really bonded on adventure. Like you have a side of you that is spontaneous, risk taking and adventurous. And I'm all about that. I
Mm.
spent the last 2 decades of my life seeking adventure.
Mm.
But then it comes down to the point of why do we seek so much adventure? What is your answer to that? Why do you seek it?
Yeah, the one word that you didn't say, but I think sums it up more than anything, is curiosity. I've got just a big curiosity for everything. And, sometimes that curiosity's got me in trouble. But there's something there that says, okay, I know that people can fly, with jetpacks. I know that people have gone to the bottom of the oceans and seen the deep sea world. And I know people have gone to space. But the curiosity makes me want to know what it would feel like for that to be me. And not just in an adventure sense, but in a love sense, everything in life. We've got a limited time to sort of experience whatever we can, and there are some experiences maybe it's best not to be curious about because they're not going to be very good. But there's a lot of things that I think you learn something through those experiences. And I remember listening to James Cameron, the movie director. He's a big idol of mine. He obviously, did Avatar and Titanic and many good films. But what's interesting, he's also an explorer. He's a deep sea explorer. And I don't know how much of this story I should go into, but there's a great story of how he wanted to see the Titanic with his own eyes. And so he told the people that were doing explorations that he was making a film about the Titanic, which was an absolute lie. And he said, if you can get me down there, I can get you in the film. And they took him down. And then he had to figure out how to make a film. Right. And that's exactly the type of person I am. It's like, yeah, sure. I'm making a film. Take me down to see the Titanic. And he said that there's something about being in the moment and seeing something with your own eyes that can just not be replicated, because it's not what you see. It's what you did to get there. It's everyone around you, what you had to learn, the feeling, the camaraderie that you just don't, well, you'll never be able to see on screen. And it's no singular feeling. It's the whole sphere of emotions and feelings that come with it that just you can't replicate. AI won't replicate, virtual reality won't replicate, because virtual reality will never be able to replicate what you did to get there, right? What you had to do in order to be able to do that. And that's probably more fulfilling than anything.
Let's just take a step back because you spoke about something super beautiful. You spoke about the fact that us as people, we're very curious, right? I think it isn't even just that we're curious about adventure. I think we're just curious about life. Why do you think like relationships and love and like celebrities are always like the most popular topic? Because people are like obsessed with other people's lives. They're just curious. They want to know what's their next step, what's their make move, how they became successful. It's always that fact of like, I want to know.
Hmm.
But very rarely do people act upon many things, right? So you and I were very curious people. You stumbled upon the fact that curiosity is what leads you to what to do what you do. Curiosity is what leads me to do what I do too. But I'm not just curious. I really, really want to take the next step and try those things. But I know so many people who just talk and never do. And over the last 6 years of us really bonding and getting to know each other, you have rode the Pacific, you have done marathons in 7 different continents, you have done Guinness World Records opportunities, you've done documentaries. I have never in my life ever seen someone say something and just do the way you do it. So clearly, you are in my mind and to me just the 1% of people out there who don't just say, they really just do. And one of the most, I would say, inspirational experiences that I had to witness is the one that when you rode the Pacific. Because to be honest, even though I know your capabilities, I was scared for you. And that's just a normal human emotion, for because I had a friend who did it not very long before and they rode the Atlantic, didn't complete that, created a documentary about it. And I saw the struggles that went with that. People were losing their lives, but you didn't care. So I'd like to ask you like, do you not fear death?
Oh yeah, absolutely. I wouldn't say I didn't care. Definitely cared. In fact, the guys that you're talking about, I went and met with them to talk with them about how their situation went wrong, to learn what we would do if things went badly and things to think about. And no, there's definitely not a negligence towards death or risk, because that's how things end soon, right? I think what excites me is really learning something so that you are able to manage and mitigate the situations. Now, when you go out, especially in a world where the environment is unpredictable, like the ocean, anything can be thrown at you. Some of it you can prepare for and plan for and train for. Some of it will throw you off guard and you just didn't expect it. And you have to be able to think on the spot and mitigate and try and fix it, try and come up with a solution. And for me, that is very exciting. And that is what I like to do. Is it's not about taking crazy risks negligently, and taking risks that could put you at danger. It's about learning how to handle those risks and manage those risks. And that really develops you as a human in terms of how you can stay calm in a situation and think about the solutions and how you manage the people around you in order to have the right action, that you're all pulling in the same direction when there's something quite critical happening. All of these things really test you, much more so than your usual daily life situations. I think some of the best leaders come from the military because they are often put in situations where the risks are so much higher that they have to come out of themselves and do something over and beyond. And they really rely on each other. And it's a very similar situation. The rowing was a very good example of that. We hit a storm after 24 hours. Our safety officer said, prepare yourself for the worst 48 hours of your life, because this is what it's going to be, just before we left. And then he said the next morning, on the day that we left, in 15 years of being a safety officer for Ocean Rose, nobody's ever died on my watch, but somebody's going to die. And you have to take it very seriously. It's there to, the mistakes are there to be made, right? So really have your focus. And that's why he meant it. He didn't mean it to scare us in a bad way. He meant it so that we were alert that this is real. And, you know, we were in that storm for 10 days.
Oh my God.
Like, I can't really ever explain how awful that time was, because it really, I just call it the first 10 days of hell. It was horrible. And we didn't know any different. We hit a storm within 24 hours, and we were in it, and we were stuck, and we were trying to get through it. The waves after one day had risen to 40 foot, and I got immensely seasick. I'm burning 8,000 calories a day, and I haven't eaten anything in 3 days, and could really not drink much water. Rowing 14 hours a day, not wanting to let my teammates down. There's something very interesting about that situation, because it was a team sport. And the only thing that mattered was how effectively we got our little rowing boat from point A to point B. That's the result. But everything in between, the world was going to throw all sorts of things at us. We almost got hit by a cargo ship on day 11, or it was day 9, sorry. And that was a very close miss. And that could have been the end, but we managed it. We came up with a solution. We've got a video of the whole thing, and you know, the things, the options we were going through: get the flares, get on the radio, get the life jackets. You know, we were preparing for being smashed in the ocean. And then we got hit by another storm, just as we were thinking. We were actually saying, I think it was 7 days to go, and we're like, guys, we got 7 days to go. This is going to be good. And that very day, at lunchtime, we get a message from our weather router. There's a low pressure heading towards Hawaii, and you're in between the pressure and Hawaii, and it's coming your way. We're going to keep an eye on it. We'll get back to you. He got back to us. He said, you're going to get hit at midnight tonight.
Oh, God.
And then, you know, it did hit us at midnight, and it caused a lot of problems. We got a rope wrapped around our rudder, 40-foot waves hitting us from the side. Yeah, that was one of the life-threatening moments when we were trying to fix this thing in the middle of the night, pitch black. The waves that you just can't see where they're coming from. But we managed, we got through it. And when we got to the other side, it wasn't just this amazing destination that we've been dreaming of for 2 years. It was, for me, the realization of a 10-year vision that I had, sat in my apartment, not happy with life.
This episode is brought to you by Gabit, the longevity ecosystem helping you live healthier and longer with smart wearables, science-backed products, and expert coaching. I've been wearing the smart Gabit Ring, and honestly, it has completely changed how I think about my health. It tracks all 4 pillars of health, including sleep, stress, fitness, and nutrition, and gives insights that actually make sense. The VO2 Max On Demand, HRV, sleep stages, workout zones, stress, calories in and out, and so much more. And I love that the AI voice logging is unreal. You can literally say what you ate and it logs it instantly. It even has this AI health coach, a PEP, to help you and assist you at all times. So if you want a smarter, science-backed way to optimize your health, check out Gabit.com. That's Gabit.com, and you can use my code MaryC for an additional 5% off. Now let's get back to the episode.
Wanting to create this alter ego. You remember you say that we show one side of ourselves on, well, I wanted to create, I knew there was something inside of me that I just hadn't become. And I wanted to do these adventures. I want to learn these things. I want to travel the world. I want to be on the red carpet at the film festivals. I want to be on podcasts. You know, podcasts didn't exist then, but you know, I wanted these types of things. I wanted a life for myself that just was more bombastic than it was. And standing there on the shores of Kauai with our hands in the air, with our flares in the air, was, for me, just the moment where I said, you know, you did it. You know, the whole vision.
What were you not happy about your life?
At that point in time, this was 2014. I had 2 failed businesses. So when one fails, you know, this is your dream and everything you put into it. And I'd been, you know, done some amazingly successful things. I was 23 years old. I I had secured $2.5 million of investment, moved to the Middle East to set up a tech business, was the CEO of a company that had 60 people. I'm 23, 24 at the time. Like, I don't see many people doing that. And we were doing some amazing things. But in the end, eventually, it failed. It failed because of partnership conflicts. I then entered another business, looked extremely hopeful with some very heavy hitting, big playing people. And it went very well until in the end, we had some issues. And I then had to sort of say, okay, I've sacrificed Christmas Day, my weekends, my evenings. I had a girlfriend who was super upset that I never spent any time with her. And I thought, if I keep going on doing this, sacrificing all of my spare time not spare time, all of my time in order to achieve this success. But then I've shown that it's not guaranteed. So maybe the next time I'll fail as well. Maybe the next time, maybe that continue forever. Then this concept of, I had to think about, what is money? Why am I doing this? I'm doing this to make money. And money in my mind was freedom tokens, right? It was tokens to be able to go where I wanted, do what I wanted. But I was sacrificing my freedom in order to do that. So if you think about it, hang on a minute, is it really freedom tokens, or is it just, because I can just stop right now. I've got the freedom to do whatever I want. But I was sacrificing in order to get there. I thought, this is a zero-sum game. This isn't worth it. The next business has to have the jewels of life that I want. And then I thought, well, what do I want? And I thought, well, I love adventures. And pretty much everything that I've now sort of manifested was a dream and a thought. I wanted to learn how to fly. I wanted to discover shipwrecks under the sea and things like this. This curiosity that I wanted to know what that felt like and do that. I wanted to create this. I came up with this idea for the TV show. And at the time, my girlfriend's mother had a terminal illness. It was called ALS. And ALS is something that's a very horrible disease that breaks down your neurons, and eventually you become paralyzed, and then you can't breathe, and then you die. And that can be a 1-year process, a 7-year process, but it's only one way out. But that left me and my now ex-girlfriend with a very clear notion that time waits for no one. So that notion, combined with my failed businesses, made me think, you're being an idiot. You need to be able to really enjoy life along the way and find a route that allows you to have this business entrepreneurship achievement that you want, but also bring in the fun things and the exciting, curious things that you want to build into your life. And that's when I came up with the idea for the TV show Guy in Dubai and the following documentaries and things that we've done since then.
Have you always been an adventurer? Like since you were younger?
Well, I think looking back, adventure has always been there. I grew up living in a cottage in the forest, and my idea of fun was to go out in the woods and play with my friends, and we, build tree houses and things like this. And so, I can see now how it fueled a bit of adventure. But I think it was when I moved to Oman in 2009.
How old were you then?
23 or 24. And it was, Oman's fantastic. I loved being there. First of all, it was a completely different world to what I was used to. Very traditionally Arabic. You look for things to do because it isn't quite as developed as, say, here in Dubai. So we would go out into the wadis and in the mountains, and every weekend we go on a different adventure, and it was brilliant. And I think that's when I started to realize, this is my thing. And then coming to Dubai, I think I was sort of missing it. It was there, but it wasn't the life that I was living at the time. And so I think it was like something that I thought, right, I need to see how I can build that into my life.
And so you're because you loved it so much. Did you feel like you were always good at everything when you were younger? Because, for example, Austin, my son, literally you give him any kind of sport or anything to do, he's literally good at it. Never have done it before. For example, earlier this year, we went to Georgia on our first ever snowboard and ski holiday. He's never snowboarded like the way he did in the past. He killed it without even an instructor. So were you that kind of child too growing up? Like you're just good at everything?
Actually, I wasn't. I was a bit mal-coordinated when I was younger, and I wasn't good at a lot of sports. The school that I went to boarding school when I was 11, and you weren't cool unless you played football, right? Football was
The thing.
the thing. And all the cool kids were basically the ones who were good at football. And I was terrible at football. I still am. And that made me think that I'm not good at sport. And then one day, it was also very much a thing at my school that the kind of crown to wear, we would say, who's the hardest in your year? It's like, who's the toughest? Who could beat anyone up? No one did it, but it was just like, who's tough? And a couple of guys were throwing the discus, which is, in athletics, it's that big heavy disc that you throw. And they were quite good at it. And I thought, right, I want to show them who's best at this. And I did it. And I wasn't quite as good as them, but I trained at it a little bit. And then I thought, I want to be the best at this. And I started training. And I became the best in the school. And then my teacher said, why didn't you go to the oval area? I seem to remember I came second, and then I came third in the county, and then I got through to the regionals. And in the end, I went to I was kind of finding my footing. I got to the nationals. And then I came fourth every year, I think for 4 years in the nationals. It was like my unlucky position. Never quite made a medal. But when I started to get to age 17, 18, that became quite... I then got a sports scholarship to Millfield, which is considered maybe the best sports school in the world. Certainly the best sports school in the UK. It's got more Olympic champions than any school in the world. And I focused more on decathlon then, which was everything. And then I became obviously very physically powerful. But no, it's always, even now, I have to put a bit of extra effort in. I don't just pick things up, but I've learned how to really focus, take it seriously, and learn things. And I've got good at learning how to do stuff. I'm not just naturally talented. I've seen Austin, and yeah, he has ability to just pick things up. Like he's got a natural thing. I don't have that. I have to work a bit harder to get there.
How old are you now, Paris? And do you think, because a lot of people put these limitations on themselves, right? And do you think that based on age, it's made you slower? Or you feel like age is not a disadvantage at all? Because, for example, I'm turning 45 this month. And there are things that I do today way stronger than I ever thought I could do back then. You know why? Because I have mental strength and resilience, which in my 20s I would doubt myself. Today I do not. So I have a higher level of confidence in myself. And based on that, I feel I can do so much more. Do you believe that to be true?
Yeah, I learn things a lot better these days than I used to when I was younger. The big difference...
So it's not a limitation. Age is not.
No, age is not a limitation.
But people put it as a limitation.
Yeah, they do. I think it's more of an excuse for them to be able to say, I'm older now. I can't do as much, But until you get to a very old age, maybe 75, and then things, you start to have declines in cognition and your fitness. Generally speaking, as long as you look after yourself and you stay active and you stay learning new things, there's no reason why things should decline. So the big difference between me now and me when I was, 18, is I have a really clear vision now for what I want for my life and what my direction is. And that means that anything that is on that path, I handle with a lot of vigor. When you don't have that direction, then it's really hard to be that motivated by things, because you don't know really what's the reason why you're doing it. What's the purpose? What does this all contribute to? And when I was younger, I didn't really know, what I was put on the planet to do. So, going to school, it was really hard to get like that into the subjects because I didn't know what was the reason for it. Now, if I was to go back and learn those things, I'd be so excited to learn them. I'd be getting straight A's, because I know what it all is for.
But also I feel when we're younger, we're forced to do things we don't want to do. So obviously our capacity to want to learn things that we don't want to learn is so much more impactful than where we are today in life. So I came from a trip in Japan this year, and I learned so much from that experience because I went to Okinawa, which is one of the blue zones, and I interviewed one of the doctors there, the doctor that basically discovered the blue zones in Okinawa. And
so what are the blue zones?
So the blue zones are basically the countries that have the most amount of centenarians.
Yes.
Yes, and obviously the book came out on the blue zones. Dan Buettner was one of those people who spoke about it, talked about it, researched about it, like really put it on the map and out there on the different blue zones all over the world. And Okinawa is obviously one of the countries which is the highest amount of centenarians in the world. And back in the day, the amount of centenarians were living up till that age and had very little disease. But now the centenarians that are, or the people that are reaching to centenarian level have a lot of like issues like dementia and Alzheimer's. So even though they're reaching to that level, it's not the same as how it used to be, where people were thriving at that age, right? So what is the point anyways of living till that age when you're a vegetable, right? That isn't the point of what existence is about, right? I don't want to reach 100 and not be able to move, thrive, live. So the point is we want to be able to reach to that level and still move, thrive, live. But going back to the point that you mentioned earlier, which I think I kind of want to bring up, is that when we're younger, we're forced into doing a lot of things, hence we are resistant to it. And as we get older, a lot of the things that we find enjoyable, we end up pursuing. And because we pursue them based on enjoyment, we have more zest for curiosity. We have more the hopes, wants, and dreams to put time into it and the patience to it to want to learn it and cultivate that experience, right? Now, in our 20s, or at least me in my 20s and many others, including yourself, as you mentioned, we don't know what we want in life. We only know based on what our family or our environment tells us we should do.
Yeah.
Whether you should be a doctor, a lawyer, a pilot, whatever it is that the world expects us to be is the journey that we follow. And then later along life, it could be mid 20s, it could be in our 30s, it could be 40s, it could be in our 50s that people are actually realizing their ikigai, which is obviously purpose in Japanese. So because you were probably at a point in your life where you were just trying to find yourself, and many people who are living in the world today and existing were just money driven because we need to pay our bills, we have responsibilities, whether it's just responsibilities for ourselves or whether it's the responsibilities that we have to take care of our family. And it's driven by that and less about, I just want to live my life based on my passions and my hobbies. Because a lot of the times people's passion and hobbies doesn't really make enough money to live, to pay off all of your responsibilities. And not everyone is fortunate enough to grow up with, parents who are wealthy. And a lot of people, which is the majority of the world and the population, grow up with nothing, that they have to build themselves from scratch. And I didn't realize this at this much later on in life, what I wanted to do and what was purposeful for me, because my entire 20s was focused as a single mom raising a son and to pay my bills. And sure, I had the most incredible job that I was blessed with because I worked in law firms making tons of money to support my son, but it wasn't my passion. It was only when I reached my 30s that I said to myself, I don't want to do this anymore. It's not what I want to wake up and live for. I hated waking up at 6 a.m. when I worked in the corporate job. And now I live for waking up at 5 a.m. every day because I'm passionate about what I do.
Yeah.
So there's a difference between doing something that you hate and then doing something what you love, right? So you've come to the point where you found something that you truly love. And now you're chasing that because it's something that you wake up every day and it fills you up with light and with purpose. And also it draws you to a point where I actually can do something meaningful and impactful because all the things that you do, it's raising money for charity, for the less fortunate, for things that adds value to your soul and not the 9 to 5 job which you were doing in the past.
Yeah.
Right? So I think, you're blessed because you found it. I'm blessed because I found that. But a lot of people die not being able to find that at all.
Yeah.
I
think we're conditioned to think that certain things are our passions when they're not, because we, as you put it, we give up on our dreams to pay the bills. And reality kicks in where you think, okay, well, I wanted to be a pop star, but that's probably not going to happen. So let's see if I could get a job in HR. It seems like a good road. I know someone who might be able to help me get some qualification, and then you basically are choosing the things that are available to you. And I think that was the the thing that was interesting to me when I had this sort of aha moment back in 2014 is I created a job that didn't exist.
Yeah.
It wasn't a thing, right? Nobody was going to come along and say, "Hey, we need a guy to go and learn how to fly, to venture around the city, to go and have a lot of fun and interview people and be on TV and all these things, and we're going to pay you to do it." No one was going to ever offer that job. That job doesn't exist. So I had to create it, and for a long while it didn't pay me very much. So it was a tough journey, and that's the price you have to pay if you really want to do the things you want to do. And thankfully, in these days, the financial side of things are okay, but for a long while it was a fight, and that's the price you got to pay to do your passions.
ALS, as you mentioned, is really a terrible disease to have. And for the longest time, there hasn't been a cure to it. But most recently, the doctor that I have, she actually came on my podcast, Dr. Midori, has been so focused on stem cells. And this was a topic that we brought up on that podcast episode where she said that she has tried stem cell treatments on people with ALS, but with no success. And most recently, she just got the backing by the Japanese government that now there are stem cells that's able to treat ALS.
Wow.
So that's the advancement of technology, and where we are in the stem cell space has those promising breakthroughs. And I think that's so incredible for people to hear now, is that we have something that can maybe transform how people go through when they have ALS.
I hope so. I've seen it really rip apart a lot of families. So, one day there will be a time where, the future families will not have to deal with that. But I hope so. I really do.
Another really fascinating, it's something that stuck with me for a while, because one of the people that you rode with, Harry, said something to me super profound, and it never left me, because that's exactly what I think about when I think about you. And he said that you went through some really challenging times during that role, right? He's seen, it really breaks you to the kind of human that you are in that experience, because it tests you in all sorts of different experiences, right? You're running with no sleep, you're barely even eating, there's seasickness, just being sick in general. And there's a lot of doubts and fears on whether you can manage to complete this or not. So it's terrifying. And fear can overconsume you to the point where you're like, I give up, I don't want to do this anymore. And you were rowing 14-hour days, you were doing it with very little sleep, and for the most part you were sick a lot of the times. And then you've had these situations where it was almost nearly impossible you're going to survive that, because the weather circumstances were just terrifying. And Harry said something to me that he didn't experience from anyone else on that row, from any of the other members on the row, is that you were the only person in the entire row that did not complain once on that entire experience. You just went at it. You were never angry, never moody, never complained. You just did it. You were literally the most patient person in that entire experience. Now, I believe that you saved that team.
He never said that to me.
Yeah, I know he didn't say that to you.
Yeah.
But he said that to me.
Yeah.
And I believe that it's because of how you were. You always need that one person in those type of experiences to push you beyond the things that you think that you can do for yourself. You're so doubtful about yourself at that stage, right? There's arguments happening, impatience happening, people losing their shit, people not able to cope. You were solid throughout that entire experience. Do you think that you were raised that way, or is something that you built over time, that your patience and resilience and your grit?
I think it's a lot of things. So, okay, let's tackle them one by one. One of them was to do with leadership, and whether you are a captain of the team or not, if you have the ability to exude the right values of leadership, then you should. So it was always in my mind about how to handle the dynamics of the team. Captain of the team was Harry's younger brother, Ollie. He was the least experienced in doing a big kind of challenge like this. He was also, I would have said, probably the least experienced in terms of leading a team. So that was an interesting one because he was our captain. His older brother, Harry, was a captain in the British Army, right? I had led businesses, sports teams, things like this. So I knew that. I also did a lot of work in leadership development. So I knew a bit about it. And I think I understood some of the traits that needed to be portrayed in order to set the right tone. And so it was very much about managing the morale and the cohesion of the team. So there was that element of it. There is, I think, a natural element to it, which is patience, which I have always had a huge amount of patience. I think that's just a personality characteristic of me. Then I'd say there's the vision. Now, for me, it was very clear how this expedition fitted into my bigger vision of who I was going to become, the vision that I created back in 2014. The other guys had their own reasons for doing it. I don't know if they necessarily had such a clear vision for what they were doing as me. For me, this added into everything. This wasn't just an adventure. This was my work. This was my hobbies. This was my productions. This was everything that it fitted into my life. For them, you know, I think it was something that they definitely wanted to do, but maybe not so aligned with everything in their life. So everything that we faced, whether it was a storm or, you know, just a tough situation, it was, for me, it was just another thing that we had to get through in order to get where we were going. So I never looked at it as hard or easy. So a lot of people ask me, like, how hard was it? It must have been really hard. I just never remember that feeling of hard or easy. I just remembered, got to do it, right? And if it was hard, then I knew I got to do it the hard way. You know, like we got to do it in rain and nighttime, right? Fine, but that was just had to be done in order to get to the vision of what I wanted to become. So that was very clearly set in my head, and I think that meant that the sum of the pieces, if you like, not so monumental as the bigger plan. And so just the day-to-days were just things we had to get through. And I think that's what I talk about when I talk about grit and resilience. I have something I call the grit code. And it's sort of, let's say, the foundational stones of what will allow your minds to be in the right place in order to have resilience.
So what's the code?
So, well, there's five things. One of those is having a vision that's aligned with your purpose and passion. You're a very hard person to beat if you have a very clear vision and reason for what you're doing, and what you're doing right now is getting you closer to that. If someone's trying to compete with you and they don't have that ultimate purpose, they will not be able to compete with you. And that is what I was talking about there, about vision. The other things are getting familiar in unfamiliar situations, getting comfortable being uncomfortable. So, you know, that could be, for example, another type of adventure, being in the cold. I did a lot of ice bathing in order to prepare myself for that, because I actually really hated the cold. I still do.
Me too. I hate the cold.
Yeah, and let's say I'm a wimp to the cold. So I thought, right, I'm going to push myself to handle it so that I can, you know, deal with that. But also other adventures that I've been on, just difficult situations, being broke, you know, like just being like, why am I in this terrible situation? Like all these things helped. I remember when I was younger, I used to live with a good friend of mine, Ed Jonkler, and we lived in London. And he said to me something that I always remembered. He said, Paris, you're like a cockroach. He said, and I thought that was like not a very nice thing to say. But then he followed up with, when there's a nuclear war and everyone's wiped out, you'll come up through the cracks. And then I was like, because he just saw the way that I just
That's so true.
Right, because like
that's so true about you.
Yeah. And so, and I don't know why I'm like that, but you know, when growing up younger, things were not easy. Like we certainly had a very tough upbringing. I certainly felt that I had to stand my own ground. If anybody ever threatened me or tried to bully me, they were going to get double back. And although I was always have been, I think, nice to everybody, I wasn't ever going to let anybody take advantage of me. And because if I did, then no one was really looking out for me. And so I guess it depends, you know, what you had growing up. And, you know, I had a single mother looking out for me, but unfortunately she had no education. She wasn't able to earn money. There were days when we didn't have electricity at home, and, you know, things like this. So we had to do the rough way. And don't have any issues with that. It gave me a lot of drive to be like, I don't want this life anymore. I want something else. I want something more. And I'm going to do anything I can to get there. And I think if I didn't have that, if I had things maybe more easily than that and things given to me easier, then I wouldn't have that burning feeling inside of discomfort to be like, I've got to get out of this. And so, that's something that is wired in me from a young age.
So what's the next code?
So that was getting comfortable in uncomfortable environments, surrounding yourself with persevering people. So Harry is a fantastic example of this.
He is.
He is one of the most disciplined guys I know.
Me too.
And you'll know it from knowing him, right?
Yeah.
But seeing him in that situation, he never broke role. He was always on shift 5 minutes early, ready to go. He was always, when we had situations, he was the first one to deal with it. So for me, I didn't quite have that same training and discipline from the army that he had. But I'm quite competitive, and I didn't ever want to be not supporting. So if I saw him, I'd be the first one there. So I was always closely behind him. So I was always like, right, let's get on it, So never let him deal with anything by himself. He's a great example of that. And, he's now one of my closest friends because of that whole situation. And, they say your real best friends are not just the people who love you and what have you, but the ones that you can call when you're in a situation. Like, who would you choose?
True.
You need to choose someone with the most utility, the ability to get things done, to handle the situation. Harry's definitely one of my 2 or 3 people. If I was in a really sticky situation, I'd call them because they would be able to deal with it. And they would have the ability, but also the willingness because of our friendship bond. So surrounding yourself with persevering people. The other one's positive mindset. Now, this sounds a bit fluffy, but when we go into it a bit deeper, it's actually really profound because we all are positive. You're a positive person, right? But sometimes we might find ourselves with limiting beliefs of what we can do. And that limiting belief hasn't come from nowhere. That limiting belief has come from experience. Quite often when we don't have experience, when we're trying to do something with a completely blank sheet, we are naively optimistic until we try and we burn our fingers and go, oh, you know what, I'm not going to, this is actually harder than I thought, or, it's not what you think. So it's experience that gives us these limiting beliefs. So how do we break through them? Well, there are many ways we can do it, but the most powerful one is the same one that gave us that limiting belief, which is experience. So the first thing we can do to change what we think about a situation is the words we say. So instead of saying, no, I don't want to do it, or I can't do it, or, I'm no good at this, we just say, even if it's not true, let's just say the words, I can do this, I'm the best at this, and I'm going to succeed at this. Let's say that. I'm trying to teach this to my niece who is very much wired into a sort of learned hopelessness, and I'm trying to help her. And I said, look, even if we don't do it, let's not worry about that. Let's just use these words, right? And when we start saying the words, it will change what we think about the situation. And then when we start changing the way we think, it will transcend into our actions. But the best way is through positive experiences. Now, if you've had a negative experience, and especially if that's a traumatic experience, it's very difficult to be like, okay, I'm going to give this a go again. But what we can do is we can break down a task or something into its components, and we can incubate that to make it safe and practice it so we get positive reinforcement. And then we can do another component of that and practice that, and then we build it all together, and now we might have a much more positive feeling about the whole experience. A good example of this for me was learning how to fly a paramotor, which is like a paraglider with a paramotor. You do ground school, you practice wing handling on the ground, you learn everything about the motor, you incubate like the landing experience by being towed off the ground, so you come up like 1 meter or 2 meters and practice flaring, so you got a soft landing. So you break each component down so that you feel positive about each element. But at some point, you've got to stand on the runway with your accelerator in your hand, and you've got to hit it full blast, 100%, and run 100% until your legs don't touch the ground anymore and you take off into the air. So to have that full confidence to do it, you have to have built very strong positive experiences of all of those components, and now you're just putting it all together. So exactly the same way is how we would handle negative thinking and try and rewire our brains in order to have a more positive way of thinking about it. And when you think about things positively, you have so much more vigor about being able to do it and push through barriers. And then the last one, I don't actually call it the last one, it's just the last one I haven't spoken about, is meticulous planning and adaptability. Meticulous planning sounds sensible. If you're going to row across an ocean or do any kind of adventure, go to a mountain, the more you plan and train for and learn all the techniques for, the more confidence you're going to have, and therefore you're going to be able to just go at something with a lot more oomph. But at some point you will find that everything that is knowable and trainable and learnable is only a small portion of everything, and that what is unknowable is actually vastly more. And then you're going to hit that reality of, I know everything there was to know, but everything that there was to know wasn't enough. And now I'm faced with situations where my playbook, my system doesn't work. And if I continue going the way I'm going, it's going to be like pushing a round peg through a square hole. So I have to adapt quickly. And that's why I call it meticulous planning and adaptability. Meticulous planning to handle all the things that you can plan for, and that ability to adapt as quickly as possible to understand this is a situation where we don't have a solution. Now we have to use creative solutions. Now, if we're working in a team, we have to have a vibe among the team that allows us to take a risk, to follow an action, or let's say a decision, to follow a decision which might be wrong. And that we're not going to blame the person for it being wrong because we don't have a rule book anymore. You can blame someone for being wrong when you are playing by a rule book in a system that we've learned and trained for, and they haven't done what we've learned and trained for. You can blame someone, hey, this is not what we trained for. Now when you're dealing with a situation where you're completely out of your depth, somebody's got to make a decision, everyone's got to back them, and it could be wrong. And you might have to change that again. And you need a team that's going to say, it's all right, we tried, we failed, let's try something else, and adapt. Rowing the ocean was a really good example of that, because we realized quite quickly that we didn't know a lot of what we needed to know. It wasn't learnable, or we hadn't learned it, whatever was the case. And we had to back each other, support each other. We made decisions that were wrong. No, we just had to get on with it. So those are my points about the grit code. There's obviously a lot more about how you train those things.
What I find really interesting is that and crazy at the same time, is that we need to grow through the lessons of life to be able to understand the grit code. But if they only took the time and effort in our system, in our society, to teach us this when we're younger, can you imagine how many super incredibly adventurous, creative, successful, brilliant people there would be in the world today if the grit code was taught to us just as we're growing up, to understand that we're not a byproduct of our past traumas, experiences. We're not the kind of people that are only limited to a few things and not the other. We're not people who are put into a box because our environment says we are meant to be put in that box. We are everything we want to be. When we're younger, we're so fearless because we know at that age we can do everything. I wanted to be a pilot and fly. I wanted to be a butterfly. I wanted to row. I wanted to do all these incredible things. And then as we get older, we're told we can't do it. You're not in the capacity to do it. You don't have the means to be that way. You're not in an environment. And so many things are put into our brains to thinking that we're less than, when we grew up thinking we're more than. So really, the grit code is something that teaches us that actually we can be everything that we want to be, regardless of your circumstance. You didn't grow up with a family that were wealthy. You grew up with a family that were less fortunate than many other people. But look at where you stand today and what you've built for yourself, because you decided that you are more, regardless if the world broke you down 1,000,000 times over and told you were less. You still decided, I'm not going to listen to any of you. And I just think that anyone that's going to listen to this episode today and hear your story and look at how incredibly brave and strong you are, and look at me and incredibly brave and strong I am for having achieved everything that I've achieved being a single mother or being a mother in general. You would know that because you grew up with a single mom, how extremely difficult that is. Parenthood is the most hardest experience ever. Yeah, just give me 5 minutes, okay? So parenthood is literally the most hardest job in the world, and only when you become a parent you really realize that. But for me, I look at it in this different perspective as well, is that people look at us as someone that's strong, but also because we're strong, people forget to ask us how we're doing. And do you ever at any stage in your life find emotional weight to that? And what do you do to regulate that for yourself? Because just because we always appear strong, it doesn't mean that we're have weak moments, right? So how are you dealing with that from an emotional standpoint when you know for a fact that we portray an image outside, but at the end we're also just human?
I don't know how to answer that with an inspirational way. I think I'm quite, the internal voices in your head. Mine are very tough on myself. Whilst I respect and try as be as empathetic to people as possible, because everybody needs are you okay? Are you all right? And I try and be like that as much as I can to other people. I don't need it so much. The very few times I'm really like not well, I say it. I say, people say, how are you? I'm like, no, I'm not. You've probably never heard me say that, right? It doesn't happen very often, but it might, whatever it is, I'm generally quite vocal about it. But the voices in my head are very, very tough on myself. It's like, it's very like, there's no time to break. Have your moment, get on, let's get on with stuff. And I'm pretty tough in terms of what I'm saying to myself inside.
And that's how you basically regulate and manage it. I think I'm exactly the same as you, though.
Yeah.
Because I think that's the reason why we don't go into deep depression, is because it's the voices in our head that helps us kind of regulate that, right? So even though we're going through like really tough moments, so for me, that's how I regulate things. I'm better at I'm focused on problem solving than just the emotional aspect to it. And I've gotten better at that with the years.
Okay, just to add to that. So I have a bit of a defense mechanism when things become a bit of an emotional overload, when things are not good. I have a way of just switching into a completely non-emotional state and just focus on what do I need to do to get me out of this situation and make it better. It might be masking the problem, but I then become very focused on things like work, things like, just things that I need to get done, because I realize that at least that's going to help me get out of the situation. I use the emotion as a driving force, as a motivator to do something. I think maybe I've been trying to figure out how I can build this into the grit code, because I've realized probably the fuel on the fire for grit is emotion. If you've got no emotion, you have no grit. It comes from emotion. So it's how you regulate that emotion to channel it in a productive, positive way that is really key. Because some people, when they get emotional, they tear the house down and they do a load of destructive and unproductive things. But if you can channel that emotion into something productive, then it's actually extremely powerful. And I think that actually links into what you're saying there, because when it comes to when I'm having something emotional or bad, I'm able to kind of control that emotion and use it as a way to try and make some progress in something that I want to do.
So I'm going to ask you now some rapid fire questions, and you just answer as fast as you can. So, okay, for example, I'm going to ask you pain or purpose. You're going to choose pain, and then you're going to say why quickly. Okay, like quick answers. Okay. All right. Pain or purpose?
Purpose. Because I think having a purpose really gives you a lot of direction and power to get things done.
Discipline or freedom?
Freedom. Because I think the ultimate times where I have been the most happy have been the times where I've had the most freedom.
Solo suffering or shared struggle?
Shared struggle. I think, with your friends and having a support network is key.
Push through or pull back?
Pushed through. I generally think of when we just pushing through looks like we're looking forward and we're going to keep going forward and not turning backwards. That's how I look at things.
Mental toughness or emotional regulation?
I kind of think these are slightly linked together here, but I would say emotional regulation. I don't believe there's no such thing as just being tough. It's about, emotional regulation, like we just spoke about a moment ago.
Identity built in success or identity forged in failure?
Identity forged in failure. I think success comes from having failed a bit and gone through things.
Preparation or adaptability?
Oh, adaptability. This is part of what I said about preparation and adaptability. Of course, you've got to have both, but you've got to have the ability to adapt, the mindset to adapt.
Solitude or connection?
Connection. Because, look, anything great ever achieved has been done as a team.
Consistency or intensity?
Consistency, because intensity can only last for so long, but most things that really require something exceptional require you to get out there every day and on your bad days as well.
Finish the mission or protect the body?
I mean, I think I'd probably have to say finish the mission because I, very much bashed my body around, for the sake of a mission.
Comfort zones or uncertainty?
Uncertainty. I like a bit of uncertainty, a bit of unpredictability more than most people. So, yeah.
External pressure or internal standards?
Internal standards, for sure. External pressure, I just see as a negative thing. I've never really seen how that really adds any benefit. It creates stress and distracts your mind. But internal standards, one of those, these are quick fire rounds.
Yeah. Control or surrender?
Control. I think when I think of surrender, I sort of feel like you've given in. That's really a last resort. So control.
Resilience as survival or resilience as evolution?
Resilience as survival. I think it's something that you learn to be resilient in order to survive whatever that form of survival is for you.
Who you were or who you're becoming?
Coming. Always look forward. Always look forward. I say this to my mum, who's, 76 now? She often loves to talk about the old days, right? And I say, Mum, we've still got more. Let's think about what we're going to do. And it's always about what you're going to become.
That for me was definitely the definition of grit and resilience. You embody grit and resilience. You embody grit and resilience. Paris Norris, I am so honored, deeply, deeply honored to have you on my podcast today, but also to call you a friend. We definitely need to do a part 2 of this because there's so much more to talk about and really dive deeper into. But I think people can take a lot from this episode, a taste of what it means to go beyond what the system tells you you can be, and to know that everything you actually want for yourself, whether it's climbing a mountain, rowing an ocean, if you put enough grit and resilience to it, you can absolutely achieve anything. So I speak that from my own personal experience. I lived, I think, many, many lives. And it is because of my own grit and resilience I'm able to achieve everything that I've achieved today. Lastly, because you're an adventure seeker as big as I am, I would love to gift you with a Gabit, which is an incredible wearable that tracks everything from your sleep, stress, hormones, including your nutrition. I know this is going to be an incredible gift for you because you are an adventure junkie like I am, and now you have something to measure all of the most important pillars of human health.
Thank you so much. And thank you for having me on the podcast. Okay, that's so cool. I wish I had that rowing across the ocean. That would have been super cool. So yeah, I look forward to trying this out. And thank you so much for having me on the podcast. This has been long awaited, and it's nice to talk about things that we don't usually talk about. Usually, as friends, we just talk about what's going on, what's happening, the gossip. But look, I remember when you were setting up your podcast, I was staying at your place for a week when I needed a place to stay coming back from Hawaii after the row. And you were like, I'm going to set up this podcast. But you've gone and done it. And now quite a few episodes in and you made it a success and you're going to keep going.
I reach 100,000 subscribers on YouTube, and I'm just a doer like you. And when I say something, I do it, and I want to inspire people to be exactly the same way. Now, this is an opportunity for me to also say, let's do an adventure together, Paris.
Okay.
I've been dying to, and then let's shoot a podcast episode and talk about that adventure.
On the adventure.
On the adventure. Wow, good one.
All right.
See you soon, Paris.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.